The ice water exploded across Clara's face. 300 people gasped as she stood there, soaked and shaking, while Edgar Whitlock's voice thundered through the town hall.
"You weakling! You think you can challenge me? You're nothing!"
His hand grabbed the pitcher for another assault. But Clara's eyes went cold. The kind of cold that comes from years in places where hesitation means death. Her stance shifted, weight balanced on the balls of her feet, and Whitlock's triumphant smirk died. Because the quiet schoolteacher he'd been humiliating had just transformed into something he didn't recognize. Something trained to end threats. Something very, very dangerous. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, please hit that subscribe button and stick with us until the very end. And drop a comment below telling us what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels.
3 months earlier, Clara Whitmore had stepped off the afternoon train into Red Willow with nothing but a battered suitcase and a teaching certificate from a school back east that nobody bothered to verify. She was small, quiet, and wore her chestnut brown hair in a practical ponytail that made her look younger than her 32 years. The town council had hired her sight unseen because nobody else wanted the job, teaching ranch kids in a one-room schoolhouse 20 miles from nowhere for wages that barely covered room and board.
"You the new teacher?" The man who met her at the station was tall, weathered, with gray streaking through dark hair and eyes that looked like they'd forgotten how to smile. Lucas Hale. He owned the biggest cattle operation in 3 counties, and he'd been the one to convince the council to finally fund a proper school.
"I am."
Clara extended her hand. Her grip was firm, firmer than Lucas expected.
"Clara Whitmore."
"Lucas Hale."
"I'll take you out to the schoolhouse. It's not much, but it's got a roof."
He paused. "Mostly." The schoolhouse was worse than Clara anticipated. Broken windows, rotted floorboards, a stove that looked like it hadn't worked since the previous century. But she didn't complain. She just set down her suitcase, rolled up her sleeves, and started cleaning. Lucas watched from the doorway. "You need help with that?"
"I've got it."
"The roof's going to leak when the snow comes."
"Then I'll put out buckets."
Something in her tone made Lucas stay. He grabbed a hammer from his truck. "Let me at least fix the shutters before it gets dark." They worked in silence until the sun dropped behind the mountains, Clara scrubbing years of dust from desks, while Lucas patched holes and replaced broken boards. When he finally left, he turned back at the door. "Why'd you really come here, Miss Whitmore? This isn't exactly the kind of place ambitious young teachers dream about." Clara kept scrubbing.
"Maybe I'm not ambitious. Maybe I just wanted somewhere quiet."
"Quiet's one thing we've got plenty of." Lucas pulled his hat lower. "But quiet don't always mean peaceful." He was gone before she could ask what he meant. The first day of school, 17 children showed up. Ranch kids with rough hands and shy eyes, dressed in whatever clothes their families could spare. Clara stood at the front of the room and looked at each of them.
"I'm Miss Whitmore. I'm here to teach you reading, writing, arithmetic, and anything else you want to learn. The only rule in this classroom is respect. You respect each other, you respect yourselves, and you respect the truth. Understood?"
A girl in the back row, maybe 10 years old, raised her hand tentatively.
"Miss Whitmore, is it true you came from back east?" "It is." "Why'd you leave?"
Clara's expression didn't change.
"Because sometimes you need to start over. Now let's begin."
The weeks passed. Clara taught with an intensity that surprised everyone. She didn't just drill multiplication tables. She taught geography using maps she'd drawn herself, history through stories that made the children lean forward in their seats, science through experiments with whatever materials she could scrounge. Parents started talking. Their kids were coming home excited about learning. Some were reading books for the first time. Lucas came by every few days, always with some excuse. Firewood, fresh milk from his dairy cows, nails for repairs. He'd stay for a few minutes, watching Clara work, then leave without saying much. One afternoon, after the children had gone home, he lingered. "You're good at this," he said quietly. "Better than any teacher we've ever had."
Thank you.
"The kids respect you. Their parents, too." He paused. "That's rare around here. Respect isn't something folks give easily." Clara looked up from the papers she was grading.
Mr.
"Hale, is there something you want to say?" Lucas shifted his weight. "Just be careful. There are people in this town who don't like change, and what you're doing here, it's changing things. Teaching children to read is threatening? When those children start asking questions their parents can't answer, yeah, it can be." He met her eyes. "Just be careful." But Clara wasn't careful. She couldn't be. It started when one of her students, a boy named Tommy Garrett, came to class with bruises on his arms. When she asked about it, he mumbled something about falling, but his eyes told a different story. Clara waited until after class. "Tommy, if something's wrong at home..." "It's not home, Miss Whitmore." The boy's voice cracked. "It's the ranch. Mr. Whitlock's foreman. He said my pa owed money for equipment rental, but my pa says he already paid. When my pa tried to argue, the foreman got rough. Said if we don't pay again, we'll lose our land." Clara's hands stilled.
Edgar Whitlock?
"Yes, ma'am. He owns half the county. My pa says we can't fight him, says we just gotta pay and keep our heads down." That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She'd heard Whitlock's name before, the richest man in the territory, controlled the bank, the land office, most of the businesses in town. But stealing from ranch families? Threatening children? She started asking questions, quietly at first, a conversation here, a careful inquiry there, and the more she dug, the uglier it got. Whitlock had been running the same scheme for years. He'd rent equipment to struggling ranchers, then claim they hadn't paid. When they protested, his men would threaten foreclosure, seizure of livestock, violence. Most families were too scared or too poor to fight back. They just paid twice and kept silent. Clara brought it to the town council. She had names, dates, amounts. She stood in front of 12 men and laid it all out.
These families are being robbed, systematically.
And you're all looking the other way. The council chamber went dead silent. Then Edgar Whitlock stood up. He was a big man, well-dressed, with silver hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. His voice was smooth, almost gentle. "Miss Whitmore, I appreciate your enthusiasm. But you're new here. You don't understand how business works in Red Willow. These ranch families, they're proud people. Sometimes pride makes them forget their debts. My records are all in order. If you're going to make accusations, you better have more than gossip from children."
These aren't accusations, they're facts. Tommy Garrett's father has a receipt.
Tommy Garrett's father is a drunk who can barely keep his ranch afloat. Whitlock's smile didn't reach his eyes. "With all due respect, Miss Whitmore, stick to teaching. Leave business matters to people who understand them." The council murmured agreement. One by one, they sided with Whitlock. He owned too much, controlled too much. Nobody was willing to challenge him. Clara walked out of that meeting with her head high, but her stomach was churning. She'd expected resistance. She hadn't expected complete capitulation. Lucas was waiting outside. "You knew this would happen." "I hoped it wouldn't." "Why didn't you warn me?" Lucas looked away. "Would it have changed anything? Would you have stayed quiet?"
"No."
"Then what good would warning you have done?" He climbed into his truck. Now you've made an enemy, Miss Whitmore. And Whitlock doesn't forget.
Neither do I, Mr. Hale.
The retaliation started within days. First, supplies Clara had ordered for the school, books, paper, chalk, mysteriously never arrived. The supplier apologized, said there was a mix-up with payment. But Clara had paid in full. When she pressed, the supplier got nervous and hung up. Then parents started pulling their children out of school. Not all of them, but enough.
Families who worked on Whitlock-owned land, who owed money to Whitlock's bank, who couldn't afford to cross him. They came to Clara with apologies in their eyes and fear in their voices.
We're so sorry, Miss Whitmore, but we can't risk it. You understand?
Clara understood. She understood that fear was a weapon sharper than any knife. But she kept teaching. The children who remained came more eager than ever, as if they knew their education was an act of defiance. Clara pushed harder, stayed later, gave everything she had. Lucas still came by, but less frequently, and when he did, there was something strained in his expression, something that looked like guilt. "You could leave," he said one evening, as winter started creeping into the valley. "Find a teaching position somewhere else, somewhere safer."
I don't run from bullies, Mr. Hale.
Whitlock's more than a bully. He's got the bank, the law, the whole damn town in his pocket. Lucas's voice dropped.
He's already talking about foreclosing on the school property. Says the council can't afford to keep paying you.
The council isn't paying me. Parents are.
Parents who are going broke because Whitlock's squeezing them.
Lucas stepped closer. "Clara, please. I've seen what he does to people who get in his way. It's not pretty."
Then help me stop him.
Lucas flinched like she'd slapped him. "I can't."
Can't? Or won't?
"You don't understand. Whitlock holds the note on my ranch. Every acre, every head of cattle. If I go against him, he'll call it in. I'll lose everything. My workers will lose their jobs. Families who've been with me for generations."
So you'll just let him keep stealing? Keep terrorizing people?
Clara's voice was sharp now.
I thought you were better than that.
"I'm practical. That's what I am." Lucas turned away. "You're asking me to sacrifice everything for a fight we can't win."
We can win if people stand together.
People don't stand together here. They survive. There's a difference. He left before Clara could respond, and something between them broke that night. Something that had been building slowly, carefully, over months of shared work and quiet conversations and moments where their hands almost touched. It cracked and fell apart, leaving only distance. Clara kept pushing. She documented everything, every false debt, every threat, every family Whitlock had cheated. She wrote letters to the territorial governor, to newspapers in Helena and Billings, to anyone who might listen. Most letters went unanswered. The few responses she got were polite but vague. Whitlock's influence stretched farther than she'd realized. Then came the day everything exploded. It was a cold morning in February. Clara was teaching fractions when the schoolhouse door banged open. Edgar Whitlock stood there with the sheriff and two of his men. "Miss Whitmore, you need to come with us." The children froze. Clara set down her chalk. "On what grounds?" "Theft, fraud, take your pick." Whitlock's smile was cold. "You've been collecting tuition from families under false pretenses. The school board never authorized you to charge fees." "I'm not charging fees. Parents are contributing voluntarily." "Voluntarily? I've got sworn statements saying you threatened to fail their children if they didn't pay." Whitlock pulled out papers. "Sounds like extortion to me." Clara's blood went cold. The statements were lies, obvious fabrications. But the signatures were real. terrified parents who'd been coerced into signing whatever Whitlock put in front of them.
This is absurd. Sheriff, you know these families. You know I would never.
The sheriff looked uncomfortable, but didn't meet her eyes. I'm sorry, Miss Whitmore. I've got to follow the law. You'll need to come answer some questions. They arrested her in front of her students,
Put handcuffs on her wrists while children cried, and Clara kept her face frozen, refusing to give Whitlock the satisfaction of seeing her fear. They held her in a cell for 3 days, 3 days of cold stone and silence, of whispers filtering through the walls about the corrupt teacher who'd been stealing from hardworking families. The story spread like wildfire. By the time they let her out, no charges filed, just a warning to reconsider her behavior. The entire town believed she was a criminal. Clara walked back to her small rented room above the general store. The shopkeeper wouldn't look at her. Women crossed the street to avoid her. Children she'd taught stared at her like she was a stranger. And Lucas Hale said nothing, did nothing. Just watched from a distance with those gray eyes that held something like regret, but not enough courage to matter. That night, Clara made a decision. She'd buy a ticket on the next train east, leave Red Willow behind. She'd fought and lost, and staying would only mean more humiliation, more isolation. She was packing her suitcase when someone knocked on her door. It was Mary Garrett, Tommy's mother. Her face was pale, her hands shaking.
Miss Whitmore, I'm so sorry. We didn't want to sign those papers. Whitlock said if we didn't, he'd take our ranch. I'm so sorry.
Clara wanted to be angry, wanted to slam the door, but all she felt was tired.
It's all right, Mrs. Garrett. I understand. It's not all right. None of this is all right.
Mary's eyes filled with tears.
You stood up for us, and we abandoned you. But I can't let you leave thinking we're all cowards. Some of us want to fight. We're just scared. Being scared isn't the same as being a coward. Isn't it?
Mary wiped her eyes.
Tommy told me what you said to him once. That courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right, even when you're terrified. You've shown us that. Now we need to show you.
Miss Garrett, there's going to be a town meeting tomorrow night. Whitlock called it. He's going to propose taking over the school completely, installing his own teacher, someone who won't ask questions.
Mary gripped Clara's hand.
Please don't get on that train. Not yet. Give us one more chance.
Clara looked at this woman who'd signed papers condemning her, who was now standing in her doorway begging for another opportunity to make things right. And, despite everything, she felt something shift.
One more chance, Clara said quietly. But this is it, Mrs. Garrett. I won't keep fighting for people who won't fight for themselves.
The next evening, the town hall was packed. Every seat filled, people standing along the walls. Whitlock stood at the front, confident and commanding, laying out his vision for the school's future. A vision that conveniently gave him control over what children learned, who taught them, what questions were allowed.
Clara sat in the back, anonymous in the crowd, waiting. Then Tommy Garrett stood up, a 13-year-old boy with his father's receipt clutched in his hand.
Mr. Whitlock, my pa paid you for that equipment. I have proof.
The room stirred. Whitlock's expression darkened. Sit down, son. This isn't children's business.
It is when you're stealing from my family.
Tommy's voice shook but didn't break.
Miss Whitmore taught us to stand up for the truth. So that's what I'm doing.
Other voices joined in. Parents standing, showing receipts, sharing stories. The dam broke. Everything Clara had documented, every family Whitlock had cheated, it all came pouring out.
And Whitlock lost control. His face went red. He slammed his fist on the podium. "You people are fools. You think you can go against me? I own this town. I own you." That's when Clara stood up. She walked down the center aisle, every eye following her. When she reached the front, she faced Whitlock directly.
You don't own anybody, Mr. Whitlock. You've been stealing from these families for years, forging documents, threatening violence, bribing officials, and I have proof of all of it.
Whitlock's laugh was harsh. "Proof? You have nothing. You're a disgraced teacher who's about to be run out of town. Nobody believes a word you say."
Maybe not, but they might believe the territorial marshal.
Clara pulled out a telegram.
I sent him copies of everything 3 weeks ago. He's been investigating, and he's arriving tomorrow.
The room erupted. Whitlock's face went white, then purple with rage. "You lying little..." He grabbed the water pitcher from the speaker's table and threw it. The water hit Clara full in the face with a force that snapped her head back. The glass shattered on the floor. The entire hall went silent. Clara stood there, water dripping from her hair, her shirt soaked, her cheeks burning with humiliation. 300 people stared at her. And Edgar Whitlock, his hands still raised, smiled triumphantly. "You weakling! You think you can stand up to me? You're nothing but a lying schoolteacher who doesn't know her place." He reached for the pitcher again, ready to throw what was left. And that's when Clara's expression changed. The fear vanished. The humiliation evaporated. Something cold and dangerous flooded her eyes, something that made Whitlock's hand freeze mid-reach. Clara wiped water from her face with slow, deliberate movements. When she spoke, her voice was different. Harder, edged with steel that nobody in Red Willow had ever heard from the quiet schoolteacher.
Mr. Whitlock, you've made a serious mistake.
Is that a threat? Whitlock tried to laugh, but it sounded forced.
No, it's a fact.
Clara stepped closer.
You know nothing about me. Nothing about where I came from or what I've done. You saw a woman you thought you could intimidate. A school teacher you could break.
Another step. The crowd leaned forward. But I wasn't always a teacher, Mr. Whitlock. Before I came to Red Willow, I spent 8 years in the United States Navy, 6 of those years as a SEAL. The room exploded. Gasps, shouts, disbelief. Lucas Hale stood up from his seat, his face shocked. Whitlock's smirk faltered. "You're lying."
Am I?
Clara's eyes were ice.
You want to test that theory? You want to find out what someone trained to survive impossible situations can do when you throw water in their face?
She tilted her head slightly, and there was something predatory in the gesture.
I've had bullets fired at me, Mr. Whitlock. I've had bombs go off 10 feet away. You think a pitcher of water scares me?
She was close enough now that Whitlock had to look up to meet her eyes.
Here's what's going to happen. You're going to sit down. You're going to stay quiet. And when the marshal arrives tomorrow, you're going to answer for every crime you've committed, every family you've cheated,
every that you've made. And if you try to run, if you try to hurt anyone else in this town, well, they didn't just teach me how to survive in the Navy. They taught me how to hunt. Whitlock opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Clara turned to address the room.
I came to Red Willow to teach because I was tired of fighting, tired of violence. I wanted a quiet life helping children learn. But you can't build peace on a foundation of fear and corruption. So if we have to fight to protect this community, then that's what we'll do. Together.
She looked directly at Lucas Hale.
No more silence. No more hiding. It's time to choose sides.
The room erupted again, but this time with a different energy. Anger, yes, but also hope. And when parents started standing, forming a wall behind Clara, Whitlock finally understood he'd lost. He tried to push past Clara toward the door, but she didn't move.
Sit down.
The command was soft, but absolute, and Edgar Whitlock, the most powerful man in Red Willow, sank back into his chair. Because he'd finally met someone more dangerous than himself. Someone who'd been hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to remind the world that underestimating a quiet woman was the deadliest mistake you could make. The town hall meeting didn't end when Whitlock sat down. It exploded. Men who'd kept their mouths shut for years started shouting questions. Women who'd lost homes demanded answers. The sheriff stood by the wall, his hand hovering near his gun, but his eyes confused, like he was watching the world he knew crack down the middle. Clara remained at the front, water still dripping from her hair, her stance wide and balanced. Lucas noticed she stood like someone ready for combat, like the ground itself was her weapon.
Miss Whitmore,
A rancher named Bill Peterson pushed forward.
you're saying you were military? Real military?
Naval Special Warfare, yes.
For how long? 8 years, 3 deployments. Clara's voice was flat, factual.
I was honorably discharged 16 months ago.
Why didn't you tell anyone? This from Sarah Chen, who ran the general store.
Why lie about who you are? I didn't lie. I just didn't share everything.
Clara met her eyes.
When you leave the service, especially that kind of service, you don't lead with it. You try to build a normal life. I came here to teach because I thought I could leave that part of myself behind.
Clearly didn't work out. Whitlock's voice was tight, controlled, but there was panic underneath. You deceived this entire community. For all we know, you're a fraud. Probably never served a day. Clara's smile was sharp.
Want me to prove it?
How exactly would you do that? She moved before anyone could blink. 1 second she was standing still. The next, she'd closed the distance between herself and Whitlock, grabbed his wrist, and had him face down on the table with his arm twisted behind his back. The whole thing took maybe 2 seconds. Whitlock gasped.
Get off me!
Clara held him there, not straining, just steady pressure.
This is a standard compliance hold. Minimal force, maximum control. They teach it in week 3 of basic training.
She released him and stepped back.
Want to see what they teach in week 20?
Whitlock scrambled up, his face purple with rage and humiliation. The sheriff moved forward.
Miss Whitmore, I can't have you assaulting folks.
He asked for proof. I provided it.
Clara's eyes never left Whitlock.
Now sit down and wait for the marshal like I told you.
For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Whitlock straightened his jacket, walked to his chair, and sat. But his eyes promised murder. Lucas finally found his voice. Clara, can we talk? Outside? She glanced at him. We're done talking, Mr. Hale.
Please.
The word hung in the air between them. Clara looked at the crowd, at the parents waiting for guidance, at the sheriff trying to figure out whose authority mattered now. Then she nodded once and walked toward the door. Outside, the February wind cut like a knife. Lucas followed her to the edge of the building, away from the windows where half the town was probably watching. Navy SEAL. Lucas's voice was quiet, almost wondering. All this time, you let me patronize you about being careful, about how dangerous Whitlock was. And you've been, what, playing helpless?
I wasn't playing anything. I was trying to be a teacher.
Clara wrapped her arms around herself, shivering in her wet clothes.
Do you know what it's like, Lucas? Spending years learning how to hurt people, how to break things, how to operate in places where one mistake means you're dead, and then trying to come back and just be normal?
No, I don't. I thought I could leave it behind. I thought teaching kids their ABCs would be enough. Her laugh was bitter.
Stupid, right?
Not stupid. Hopeful. Lucas pulled off his coat and offered it to her. She hesitated, then took it. Why'd you really come here? To Red Willow specifically? Clara was quiet for a long time.
Because nobody knew me. Nobody would look at me and see a weapon first, a person second. I could just be Clara, the school teacher. Someone soft and safe and ordinary.
You're not ordinary.
No, but I wanted to be.
She looked back at the town hall.
And now everyone knows. Now they're going to look at me differently, ask questions I don't want to answer, expect things I don't want to give.
Lucas stepped closer. What are you most afraid of? That they'll see you as dangerous? Or that they'll ask you to be dangerous again? The question hit like a punch. Clara turned away, but not before he saw her eyes shimmer.
Both,
she whispered. Before Lucas could respond, the town hall door burst open. Mary Garrett ran out, her face panicked.
Miss Whitmore, Whitlock's gone!
They ran back inside. The room was chaos. The chair where Whitlock had been sitting was empty. The sheriff was arguing with Bill Peterson. Parents were shouting over each other.
What happened?
Clara demanded. He said he needed the outhouse, the sheriff explained, looking miserable. I sent Deputy Harris with him, but...
But what?
Harris is on Whitlock's payroll. This from Tommy Garrett, his young voice cutting through the noise. Everyone knows that. Clara swore under her breath.
How long ago?
5 minutes, maybe 6. She was already moving toward the door. Lucas grabbed her arm. Where are you going?
To stop him before he runs or destroys evidence or hurts someone.
She pulled free.
Sheriff, get a posse together. Search his office, his house, anywhere he might.
A gunshot cracked through the night. Everyone froze. Then screaming started from the direction of the school. Clara ran. Not the careful jog of someone being cautious, a full sprint that left everyone else behind. Lucas followed as fast as he could, his heart hammering. By the time he reached the schoolhouse, Clara was already inside. The door hung open. Lantern light flickered from within. Lucas stepped through and stopped cold. Whitlock stood in the center of the room, a pistol in his hand. Kerosene splashed across the desks and walls. Deputy Harris stood beside him, holding a torch. Clara stood between them and the door, her hands empty, her face calm.
Don't do this,
she said quietly. Whitlock's laugh was unhinged. Don't do what? Burn down the source of all my problems? Why not? The marshal shows up tomorrow, I'm finished anyway. Might as well take away what you love most.
This isn't about me. You'll hurt children. Their work, their books, everything they've built.
Should have thought of that before you destroyed my life. Whitlock raised the gun, pointing it at Clara's chest. You couldn't just teach. You couldn't just stay in your lane. You had to play hero. Lucas eased forward, trying to circle around. Clara saw him and gave the tiniest shake of her head. Stay back.
Put the gun down, Edgar.
Clara's voice was different now, softer. The voice of someone talking to a panicked animal.
Nobody has to get hurt.
Too late for that. Whitlock's hand shook. Harris, light it up. Sir, maybe we should light it up. Harris lowered the torch toward a kerosene-soaked desk. The flames caught instantly, racing across the wood with a hungry roar. And Clara moved. She closed the distance to Harris in 3 strides, grabbed the torch, and threw it through the open door into the snow outside. Then she turned back to Whitlock, who was still aiming the gun, but seemed frozen in shock.
"Shoot me or don't," Clara said. "But that fire's going out either way."
Lucas ran to the water barrel and started throwing buckets on the flames. Other townspeople who'd followed began helping, a bucket brigade forming instantly. The fire was small still, contained. They could beat it. Whitlock's gun hand trembled. "You think you've won? You think this ends tomorrow when some marshal shows up? I've got friends, lawyers, people who owe me favors in places you've never heard of. I'll tie this up in courts for years. And when I'm finally free, I'll make sure you never work, never teach, never have peace again."
"Maybe."
Clara took a step forward.
"Or maybe you'll spend the next 20 years in prison thinking about how you threw everything away because you couldn't stand a woman questioning your authority."
"I built this town. Everything here exists because of me."
"No. You controlled it. There's a difference."
Another step. She was within arm's reach now.
"And control isn't the same as creation, Edgar. Control is just fear with better clothes."
Whitlock's finger tightened on the trigger. Lucas saw it happen, saw the moment the man decided to shoot, and he opened his mouth to scream a warning. But Clara was already moving. Her hand snaked out, knocked the gun barrel aside just as it fired. The bullet punched into the ceiling. Before Whitlock could recover, she had the gun out of his hand and was forcing him to his knees with that same compliance hold she'd demonstrated earlier.
"Sheriff!"
she called.
"You ready to do your job now?"
The sheriff stepped forward, looking relieved to finally have clear instructions. "Deputy Harris, you're under arrest for arson and attempted destruction of property. Mr. Whitlock, you're under arrest for assault with a deadly weapon, arson, and I'm sure the marshal will have a whole lot more charges tomorrow." As the sheriff cuffed them both, Whitlock looked up at Clara with pure hatred. "This isn't over."
"Yes,"
Clara said quietly.
"It is."
They dragged him out into the snow. The fire was out now, thanks to the bucket brigade, though the damage was visible. Scorched desks, water-soaked books, the smell of smoke thick in the air. Clara stood in the middle of it all, still holding Whitlock's gun, her shoulders finally slumping. Lucas approached carefully. "You all right?"
"No."
She set the gun down on a desk.
"I told myself I'd never do that again. Never use those skills outside of combat. And the first time someone pushes me, I fall right back into old patterns."
"You saved the school. Probably saved lives."
"I know. Doesn't make it feel better."
She looked at the damaged classroom.
"I just wanted to teach, Lucas. That's all I wanted."
"I know. And you're good at it. Those kids love you."
"They loved Miss Whitmore, the teacher, not Clara Whitmore, the soldier."
She turned to face him.
"And you? What do you see when you look at me now?"
Lucas considered lying, saying something comforting, but she'd know. "I see someone stronger than I gave you credit for. Someone braver than I'll ever be." He paused. "And I see someone I failed when she needed me most." Clara's expression softened slightly.
"Why didn't you help me? Before tonight, when I was fighting alone?"
"Because I was scared." The admission hurt. "Whitlock holds my ranch note. If I'd gone against him, I'd lose everything. My land, my livelihood, my workers' jobs. It felt like an impossible choice."
"And now?"
"Now I know there are things worse than losing a ranch." Lucas met her eyes. "Like losing your integrity. Like watching someone fight for what's right,
and doing nothing. Before Clara could respond, Mary Garrett pushed through the crowd.
Miss Whitmore, the children, they're all outside. They want to know if school's canceled.
Clara looked at the damaged room, the soggy books, the charred desks. Then she looked at the parents gathered around, waiting for her decision.
Tell them we'll have class tomorrow.
We'll meet outside if we have to, under the trees if the weather holds, but we're not canceling. She raised her voice so everyone could hear.
Whitlock wanted to destroy what we've built here. We're not giving him that satisfaction.
A cheer went up, quiet at first, then louder. Parents started organizing cleanup crews, salvage operations. Someone offered their barn if the weather turned bad. Someone else had spare desks in storage. Lucas watched Clara coordinate it all, still shivering in her wet clothes but directing people with calm efficiency. This was her combat zone now. Not deserts or mountains, but a small Montana town. And she fought for it with the same intensity she'd probably brought to every other battle. He made a decision. "Clara," he called. She turned. "I'm going to the bank first thing tomorrow. I'm withdrawing everything I have and paying off my ranch note early. I don't care what it costs. I'm done being under Whitlock's thumb." Her eyes widened.
Lucas, you don't have to.
"Yes, I do. You asked me to stand with you. I should have done it months ago." He stepped closer. "But I'm doing it now. Better late than never, right?" Something in Clara's expression shifted. Not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement. It's a start. The crowd worked through the night, salvaging what they could. By dawn, the schoolhouse was still damaged, but functional. Someone had brought coffee. Someone else made biscuits. Kids showed up early, eager to help. Clara sat on the front steps, exhausted, watching the sun rise over the valley. Lucas joined her, offering a cup of coffee. "The marshal arrives at 10, he said. "I know." "You ready to testify? To tell him everything?" "Not really, but I'll do it anyway." She sipped the coffee. "What happens after, though? That's what I can't figure out. Even if Whitlock goes to prison, this town is damaged. Trust is broken."
Some of those parents who pulled their kids out, who signed those false statements, they're good people who were scared. How do we rebuild from that? The same way we rebuild the school. One piece at a time. With patience, Clara smiled faintly. "You sound like you've been thinking about this." "I've been thinking about a lot of things." Lucas set down his coffee. "Including whether I have any right to ask you to stay. After everything. After I let you down." "You want me to stay?" "I want you to do whatever makes you happy. But yes, I want you to stay." He paused. "This town needs you. Those kids need you. And I need you." Clara looked at him for a long moment. "I'm not the person you thought I was." "No, you're better. Stronger. More complicated." Lucas's voice was rough. "And I was an idiot for not seeing it sooner. For not supporting you when it mattered. You were protecting your ranch. Your people. There's a difference between protecting and hiding. I was hiding." He turned to face her fully. "But I'm done with that. Whatever comes next, with Whitlock, with the town, with anything, I'm standing with you. If you'll let me." Clara was quiet. Then she reached out and took his hand. "One condition." "Anything." "No more secrets. No more staying silent when things get hard. If we're doing this, rebuilding the town, building trust, we do it honestly. Completely." Lucas squeezed her hand. "Deal." They sat together as the sun climbed higher, warming the frozen valley. Around them, the town of Red Willow started to wake. Shopkeepers opening stores, ranchers heading out to check cattle. Kids running toward the damaged school with more enthusiasm than seemed possible. At 9:45, a horse-drawn wagon appeared on the horizon. The territorial marshal, right on time. Clara stood, brushing off her skirt.
Here we go.
Lucas stood beside her. Together.
Together,
she agreed. But as the wagon drew closer, something felt wrong. The marshal was supposed to come alone, or maybe with a deputy. This wagon had 4 men, and they were moving too fast, kicking up dust like they were in a hurry. Clara's military instincts kicked in.
Lucas, get inside. Get everyone inside.
What? Why?
Those aren't marshals. Move!
She ran toward the town hall where most people had gathered. Lucas followed, his heart pounding. By the time they burst through the door, the wagon was pulling up outside. 4 men climbed down. They wore badges, but their eyes were wrong. Too cold, too focused. The lead man walked straight to the sheriff, who'd been dozing in a chair. "We're here for Edgar Whitlock."
He's in custody, waiting for the territorial marshal.
"We are the marshal's representatives. Transfer of prisoner authorized by territorial authority." The man produced papers, official-looking, with seals and signatures. The sheriff squinted at them. "I don't recognize this seal." "You questioning territorial authority, Sheriff?" "No, sir, but the marshal himself said he'd come personally." "Plans changed. Release the prisoner. Now." Clara pushed through the crowd.
Sheriff, those documents are forgeries.
The lead man's eyes locked onto her. "And you are?"
The primary witness against Edgar Whitlock. And those papers are fake. Look at the seal. It's reversed. Someone used a mirror to copy it.
The man's hand moved to his gun. "Big accusation, ma'am."
Accurate accusation.
Clara didn't move, but her body shifted into that combat-ready stance again.
You're not here to transfer Whitlock legally. You're here to break him out. Question is, who paid you?
For a moment, nobody breathed. Then the lead man smiled. "Whitlock warned us you were clever. Said you used to be military, some kind of special soldier. That true?"
Yes.
"Good. Been a while since we had a real challenge." His hand moved to his gun. "Now step aside, or we'll go through you." Lucas moved to stand beside Clara, then Bill Peterson, then Mary Garrett, then others, forming a wall between the fake marshals and their prisoner. The lead man laughed. "You people are fools. We're authorized peace officers."
You're hired guns, Clara interrupted. And if you draw on civilians, you'll hang. Every person in this room is a witness. You really want to commit murder in front of 300 people?
The standoff stretched. Then, from outside, a new voice called out. "Federal Marshal Thomas Brennan! Everyone stay calm!" A different wagon appeared, this one with an actual marshal's insignia and 2 deputies, the real lawmen. The fake marshals saw them and bolted for their horses. 2 made it. 2 didn't. Clara and Lucas tackled them before they could mount. Within minutes it was over. The fake marshals were in custody. The real marshal was questioning witnesses, and Whitlock, still in his cell, realized his last escape plan had failed. Marshal Brennan looked at Clara with something like respect. "You the one who sent me all that evidence?"
Yes, sir.
"Impressive work. Thorough. Professional." He paused. "Military background?"
Navy, special warfare.
"Figures. You interested in consulting work? We could use someone with your skills in territorial investigations." Clara shook her head.
I'm a teacher now, Marshal. That's all I want to be.
He smiled. "Pity. But I understand." He looked around at the damaged school, the exhausted townspeople, the children watching with wide eyes. "Looks like you've got your hands full here anyway."
Yes, sir. I do.
As the marshal led Whitlock and the fake officers away, the town finally exhaled. It was done. Really done. Clara sat on the school steps again, too tired to stand. Parents came by one, some apologizing, some thanking her, all of them seeing her differently now. Not just the quiet teacher, not just the dangerous soldier, something more complicated, something real. Lucas sat beside her. "So, consulting work with the marshal's office. That would have paid well."
Don't care.
"Really? Not even tempted?" Clara looked at the children playing in the yard, already making games out of the morning's drama.
Those kids need consistency. They need to know someone's staying, fighting for them, teaching them.
She turned to Lucas.
I spent 8 years leaving places, going wherever the mission took me. Maybe it's time to prove I can stay, even after everything? The lies, the betrayal, the attacks? Especially after everything.
Clara's voice was firm.
Running away is easy. Staying and rebuilding? That takes real courage.
Lucas smiled. Then I guess we're both learning courage.
I guess we are.
And as the sun climbed toward noon on that cold February day, Red Willow began the slow process of healing. Not perfectly, not easily, but honestly. Together. The trial was set for 3 weeks later in Helena. 3 weeks that should have been peaceful, should have been about recovery and rebuilding. But nothing in Red Willow came easy. 2 days after Whitlock's arrest, the bank sent notice. All outstanding loans were being called in immediately. Every rancher, every business owner, every family that owed Whitlock's bank money had 30 days to pay in full or face foreclosure. Lucas stood in Clara's temporary classroom. They'd moved to Bill Peterson's barn while the schoolhouse was being repaired, holding the notice in his hand. His face was gray. 30 days. I can't raise that kind of money in 30 days. Nobody can. Clara looked up from helping Tommy with his multiplication tables.
They're trying to destroy the town before Whitlock even goes to trial.
It's legal, though. Banks can call loans if they have cause. And with Whitlock arrested, they're claiming the institution is unstable. Lucas crumpled the paper.
They're going to take everything.
Who's they? Whitlock's in jail.
His lawyers, his business partners, people who've been profiting from his schemes for years.
Lucas sat heavily on a hay bale. Even if Whitlock goes to prison, his empire doesn't disappear. It just gets handed to the next vulture. Clara dismissed the children for recess, watching them run outside before turning back to Lucas.
How much do you owe?
$12,000. I've got maybe 4 in savings and assets I could liquidate quickly. He rubbed his face. I'm going to lose the ranch, Clara. Everything my family built for 3 generations.
Not if we fight back.
How? We can't raise that kind of money. Half the town is in the same situation. Even if we pooled resources,
then we don't pool money. We pool information.
Clara's eyes had that sharp look again, the one that meant she was strategizing.
Whitlock's partners want to foreclose because they're scared.
The trial's going to expose everything, which means they're vulnerable right now. Desperate.
So?
So desperate people make mistakes. She grabbed paper and pencil.
Who holds the actual loan documents? Who has access to Whitlock's records?
The bank manager, Henry Sutton. He's been there 20 years.
Is he loyal to Whitlock?
Lucas considered. I don't know. He's always been careful. Never takes sides.
Then he's worth talking to.
Clara stood.
Come on.
They found Henry Sutton in his office at the bank, staring at a mountain of paperwork with the expression of a man watching his life collapse. He looked up when they entered, and for a moment, Clara saw fear flash across his face.
Mr. Hale, Miss Whitmore, I can't extend your loan deadline. The orders came from the regional office. We're not here about extensions.
Clara closed the door.
We're here because you're in trouble, Mr. Sutton, and we can help each other.
Sutton's hands trembled slightly. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. You've been Whitlock's banker for 2 decades. You've seen every transaction, every forged document, every illegal transfer. You've probably been forced to participate in some of it. Clara's voice was gentle but firm. And now that he's arrested, you're wondering when the investigation is going to circle back to you. The blood drained from Sutton's face. I didn't have a choice. He said if I didn't cooperate, he'd ruin me, my family. I believe you, and that's exactly what you're going to tell the marshal when you testify. Clara leaned forward. But first, you're going to help us save this town. How? By finding every illegal transaction in Whitlock's records, every forged deed, every fraudulent loan, every bribe. We document it all, bring it to the marshal, and use it as leverage. She paused. In exchange, you cooperate fully and we recommend leniency. You made mistakes, but you can make them right.
Sutton's eyes filled with tears.
You'd do that? After everything? Everyone in this town has made compromises to survive Whitlock. You're not special. Lucas's voice was harder than Clara's. But now you have a choice. Keep protecting a man who's going to prison, or help the people he hurt. Sutton looked at them both for a long moment. Then he unlocked a drawer in his desk and pulled out a ledger. This is the real accounting. The one Whitlock made me keep separate from the official books. Every crime he committed through this bank for the last 15 years is documented here. Clara felt her pulse quicken. Why did you keep it? Insurance. In case he ever turned on me. Sutton's hands shook as he handed over the ledger. I'm a coward, Miss Whitmore. But I'm not a fool. They took the ledger straight to Marshal Brennan, who was still in town gathering evidence. When he saw what it contained, his eyes widened. This is enough to bring charges against half the business owners in the territory. Bribery, fraud, racketeering, conspiracy. He looked at Clara. Where did you get this? A witness who wants to cooperate. Henry Sutton? Clara nodded. He's willing to testify, fully, in exchange for consideration. Brennan flipped through pages, his expression growing darker. Some of these names, these are prominent people. Judges, politicians. This is bigger than I thought. Which means calling these loans is illegal, Lucas said. They're trying to silence witnesses by destroying the town financially. You're right. This gives me grounds to freeze all foreclosure actions pending investigation. Brennan closed the ledger. I'll need Sutton's official statement by tomorrow. Can you arrange that? Yes, sir. As they left the marshal's office, Lucas let out a breath he'd been holding for days. We did it. We actually bought time. Time isn't victory, Clara said, but it's a start. They were walking back toward the barn when a rider galloped into town, his horse lathered with sweat. He slid to a stop in front of the sheriff's office. Sheriff! Sheriff Morgan! The sheriff emerged, alarmed. What's wrong, Jenkins? It's the Peterson Ranch! Fire! The whole north pasture is burning! Clara and Lucas looked at each other and ran for Lucas's truck. By the time they reached Peterson's land, flames were racing across dry winter grass, driven by wind toward the main house, where Bill Peterson's family was frantically loading valuables into wagons. How did this start? Clara shouted over the roar of the fire. Don't know, Bill yelled back. Just suddenly erupted near the fence line. Clara studied the pattern of the flames. Too organized, too deliberate. This wasn't an accident. What? Look at how it's burning. 3 separate ignition points, all upwind of the house. Someone set this. Bill's face went white with rage. Whitlock's people. They're sending a message. Where's your family? Inside, packing. Get them out, now. If this is arson, they might have more planned than just fire. Bill ran toward the house. Lucas grabbed shovels from the barn and started organizing a fire break. Clara surveyed the situation with military precision, calculating wind speed, fuel sources, escape routes. "We can't stop the fire," she told Lucas, "but we can redirect it. If we dig a break here and here, force it toward the creek." An explosion rocked the barn. Flames shot 50 feet into the air. People screamed and scattered. "That was deliberate," Clara grabbed Lucas. "Someone's still here. Someone's escalating." She ran toward the tree line where she'd seen movement. Lucas followed, his heart pounding. They found him 30 yards into the woods. Deputy Harris, the corrupt lawman who'd helped Whitlock try to burn the school. He had a can of kerosene and a torch. "Going somewhere, Deputy?" Clara's voice was ice.
Harris spun, reaching for his gun, but Clara was faster. She closed the distance, disarmed him, and had him on the ground in seconds. Lucas grabbed the kerosene before it could spill.
"You're supposed to be in jail," Lucas shouted. "Bail, posted this morning." Harris spit dirt. "You people think you've won? You've barely started fighting. There's a dozen men like me, 100, people who made good money with Whitlock. You think they're just going to let some school teacher destroy that?" Clara tightened her grip. "You just committed arson and attempted murder. That bail's getting revoked." "Prove it. I was just walking in the woods. That fire could have started anywhere." "With a kerosene can and a torch?" Lucas held up the evidence. "You're done, Harris." They dragged him back to the ranch where the sheriff was already helping fight the fire. When Sheriff Morgan saw Harris, his expression hardened. "Damn it, Harris.
You couldn't just take your punishment and go quiet?
"They're destroying everything."
Harris struggled against Clara's grip.
"Whitlock built this town. These ungrateful—"
"Whitlock bled this town dry," the sheriff interrupted, "and you helped him do it. I should have seen it years ago." He looked at Clara. "I'll take him. You two help with the fire." They worked through the night. By dawn, the fire was out, but Peterson had lost 20 acres of pasture and his barn. The house was saved. His family was safe. But the message was clear. Fighting back had consequences. Clara sat on the porch steps, covered in soot and ash, watching the sunrise. Lucas brought her water. "This is going to get worse before it gets better," he said quietly.
"I know."
"More people are going to get hurt, maybe killed."
"I know."
"You could still leave. Get away from this. Let the marshal handle it." Lucas sat beside her. "Nobody would blame you." Clara took a long drink of water. "Would you leave?" "No." "Then don't ask me to." She looked at him.
"I'm tired of running, Lucas. I ran from the military, ran from combat, ran from everything that reminded me of violence. And look where it got me. Right back in another war, just with different weapons."
"This isn't your war to fight."
"Yes, it is. These kids, these families, they're mine now. I claimed them when I stood up in that town hall, when I told Whitlock I wouldn't be intimidated." Her voice was fierce. "And I don't abandon people I've claimed. Not anymore."
Lucas was quiet for a moment. Then he reached out and took her hand. "Then we fight together."
"Together," she agreed.
But as the sun climbed higher, a wagon appeared on the horizon. Not the marshal this time. Someone else. The wagon pulled up and a woman stepped down. She was in her 50s, dressed in expensive traveling clothes with steel gray hair and eyes that reminded Clara uncomfortably of her commanding officer from the Navy.
"Clara Whitmore," the woman called. Clara stood slowly.
"Yes? My name is Victoria Hale. I'm Lucas's mother. And we need to talk."
Lucas froze. "Mother? What are you doing here?"
saving you from making the biggest mistake of your life.
Victoria's eyes swept over Clara, assessing, judging.
I heard about your little school teacher, former Navy SEAL, according to the telegrams, causing quite a stir. Mother, this isn't the time. It's exactly the time. Before you throw away everything for some damaged woman playing hero.
Victoria turned back to Clara.
How much will it take?
Clara blinked.
Excuse me? To leave. To get out of my son's life and this town. 10,000? 15? Name your price.
The words hung in the air like poison. Lucas stepped forward, his face red with anger.
Mother, you can't. I can, and I am. I built this ranch from nothing after your father died. I kept it running through droughts and depressions.
And I'm not going to watch you lose it because you're infatuated with some troubled veteran who attracts violence everywhere she goes. Clara felt something cold settle in her chest.
Mrs. Hale, I understand you're protective of your son. You understand nothing. You come into this town, stir up trouble, make enemies of powerful people, and now you're dragging Lucas down with you.
Victoria's voice was sharp.
The bank is calling his loan because of you. His ranch is at risk because of you. How many more people have to suffer for your crusade?
That's enough, Lucas's voice cracked like a whip. Clara didn't cause any of this. Whitlock did. His corruption, his crimes, that's what's destroying this town.
And what was here before? Peace, order. People made livings, raised families. So what if Whitlock cut some corners? That's how business works in frontier territory.
Victoria's eyes were cold.
Now you've got fires and shootings and investigations that are going to tear apart every institution we have. Was it worth it? For what? Justice? She said the word like it tasted foul. Clara stood very still, processing. This was a different kind of enemy. Not physical, not stupid. Victoria Hale was intelligent, calculating, and completely serious.
Mrs. Hale, I won't leave because you offer me money. And I won't leave because you're scared for your son.
Clara's voice was steady.
But I will leave if Lucas asks me to. If he thinks his mother is right, that I'm causing more harm than good. That's his choice to make.
Victoria turned to her son.
Well, are you really going to choose this woman over everything we've built?
Lucas looked between them, his mother imperious and certain, and Clara covered in ash from fighting a fire to save a neighbor's home. The choice should have been impossible.
Mother, I love you. I respect everything you've done for this family.
His voice was quiet but firm. But you're wrong. About Clara, about Whitlock, about all of it. Victoria's face hardened.
If you continue down this path, I'll withdraw my investment in the ranch. Every dollar I've put in over the years. You'll lose everything.
Then I'll lose everything. Lucas stepped beside Clara. But I'll do it standing up for what's right, instead of kneeling for what's easy. For a long moment, Victoria said nothing. Then she climbed back into her wagon.
You're a fool, Lucas. Just like your father.
She snapped the reins.
Don't come crying to me when it all falls apart.
The wagon rolled away, leaving Lucas and Clara standing in the ash-covered yard.
I'm sorry, Clara said quietly. I didn't mean to come between you and your family.
You didn't. She did. Lucas watched his mother disappear down the road. She's been like this since my father died. Controlling, afraid. She thinks holding tight to everything is the same as protecting it. She's not entirely wrong, though. I have brought danger to this town.
No, you brought truth. Whitlock brought danger. He just hid it better.
Lucas turned to face her. And for what it's worth, I meant what I said. I'd rather lose the ranch standing beside you than keep it by staying silent." Clara felt something shift in her chest, something warm and terrifying.
"Lucas."
A gunshot cracked across the valley. They hit the ground instinctively. More shots followed, rapid fire, coming from the direction of town. People were screaming. Lucas and Clara ran for the truck. By the time they reached Red Willow's main street, chaos had erupted. The bank's windows were shattered. People were running for cover. And in the middle of the street stood 3 men with rifles, firing into the air. "Everyone out!" one of them shouted. "This town's under new management. Anyone who supported Clara Whitmore or testified against Mr. Whitlock, you've got 1 hour to pack and leave. Anyone still here after that? We start burning buildings!" Clara recognized one of them, another of Whitlock's hired men who must have posted bail. The other 2 were strangers, professional guns by the look of them. Lucas grabbed her arm.
"Clara, there's 3 of them, and they're armed. We need to wait for the sheriff. The sheriff's 1 man with a pistol. These are professional killers."
Clara's mind raced, calculating angles, cover, timing.
"If we wait, people will die. If you go out there, you'll die."
Clara looked at him, and he saw something in her eyes that made his blood run cold. The same expression she'd had when facing down Whitlock's gun, when disarming Deputy Harris. The look of someone who'd accepted that violence was the only language some people understood.
"Stay here," she said.
"Clara, no!" But she was already moving. She walked into the middle of the street, hands visible, expression calm. The 3 gunmen turned to face her.
"Well, well,"
the famous Navy SEAL. The lead gunman grinned. "We were hoping you'd show up. Makes this easier."
"Put down the rifles and leave," Clara said. "Last chance."
The gunman laughed. 3 against 1, sweetheart. You might be trained, but you're not bulletproof."
"You're right. I'm not." Clara's voice was utterly calm. "But you're going to put down those rifles anyway. Because if you don't, what happens next is going to haunt you for the rest of your very short lives."
The gunman's smile faltered. Big talk from someone who's unarmed.
"Who says I'm unarmed?"
Clara's hand moved in a blur, pulling a pistol from the small of her back, Lucas's backup piece she'd grabbed from his truck. Before any of them could react, she'd fired 3 shots. Not at them, at the ground in front of their feet, kicking up dust and making them jump back.
"Next 3 shots won't miss," she said quietly. "Now drop the rifles."
For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then the lead gunman's eyes narrowed, and he raised his rifle. What happened next, Lucas would later struggle to explain. Clara moved like water, like smoke, like nothing human should be able to move. She was beside the gunman before he could aim, had stripped the rifle from his hands, and used it to knock out the second man before the third even registered what was happening. The third gunman got his rifle up, finger on the trigger. Clara threw the captured rifle like a spear, hitting him in the chest and knocking him backwards. Then she closed the distance and finished the fight with brutal efficiency. 30 seconds. 3 professional killers, disarmed and unconscious. Clara stood in the street, breathing hard, blood on her knuckles where she'd struck bone. The entire town stared in shocked silence. Then Sheriff Morgan stepped out from cover, his expression a mixture of awe and fear.
"Miss Whitmore, what the hell did I just witness?"
Clara looked down at the unconscious men, then at her shaking hands. When she spoke, her voice cracked.
"Something I promised myself I'd never do again."
She dropped the pistol and walked away, leaving Lucas to explain to the sheriff what had happened. She walked past the bank, past the general store, past watching faces, until she reached the creek at the edge of town.
There, she sat on the cold ground and wrapped her arms around herself, trying to stop shaking. Lucas found her 20 minutes later. He sat beside her without speaking.
I hurt them, Clara finally whispered. Not in self-defense, not to protect myself. I could have waited for the sheriff, called for help, done anything else. But I chose violence because it was faster, easier. Because some part of me wanted to prove I could still do it.
You saved lives.
Maybe. Or maybe I just proved Victoria right. That I attract violence. That everywhere I go, people get hurt.
She looked at him with haunted eyes. What if she's right, Lucas? What if I'm the problem? Lucas took her hand carefully. Clara, those men came here to kill and terrorize. You stopped them. That's not bringing violence, that's ending it. Is there a difference? Yes, there has to be. He squeezed her hand. Otherwise, every soldier who ever fought for something good is just a killer. Every person who ever stood up to evil is just violent. And I don't believe that. I don't believe you are that. Clara was quiet for a long time, watching the water flow past. I'm scared, Lucas. Scared that this is who I am. That when things get hard, I'll always choose the fight instead of the peace. Then I'll remind you, every day if I have to, that you came here to teach, that you're good at it, that those kids love you not because you can fight, but because you care. He turned her face gently toward him. You're not defined by your worst moments, Clara. You're defined by what you do after them. Tears streaked through the dirt on her face. What if I can't be both? The teacher and the warrior? Then be neither. Be Clara. Just Clara. Whoever that turns out to be. She leaned against him, exhausted beyond measure, and for the first time since arriving in Red Willow, she let herself cry. Not quiet tears, but deep sobs that shook her whole body. Years of holding herself together, of pretending the war hadn't changed her, of trying to be normal when normal felt impossible. It all came pouring out beside that cold creek. Lucas held her and said nothing. Because sometimes there were no words. Sometimes all you could do was be present while someone else fell apart and trusted you enough to witness it. When the tears finally stopped, Clara pulled back and wiped her eyes. Sorry. Don't apologize. I got your shirt wet. I don't care about my shirt. He smiled slightly. Feel better? No. But I feel something. Less alone, maybe. Good, because you're not alone. Lucas stood and offered his hand. Come on, we've got to figure out what to do with 3 unconscious gunmen and a town that just watched you take them down barehanded. The sheriff's going to have questions. Clara let him pull her up. What are we going to tell him? The truth? That you did what had to be done, and that if Whitlock's people keep coming, they'll keep losing. He paused. But maybe we should also start thinking about ending this permanently, before anyone else gets hurt. How? I don't know yet, but there has to be a way. Lucas started walking back toward town. Maybe it's time to stop playing defense and start attacking the problem at its source. Clara followed, her mind already working on possibilities. Because he was right. They couldn't keep reacting to threats. They needed to finish this, completely. And deep down, in that part of herself she tried to ignore, Clara knew exactly how to do that. The question was whether she was willing to become that person again. Whether she could use her most dangerous skills one more time and still come back to being the teacher she wanted to be. Or whether, once unleashed, that darkness would consume everything she'd tried to build. The trial was in 2 days. 2 days until everything would either end or explode beyond control. Clara stood in the repaired schoolhouse that evening, alone, staring at the new desks Lucas had built with his own hands. Everything looked fresh, clean, hopeful, like the violence had never happened. But it had. And Clara knew better than anyone that fresh paint couldn't erase bloodstains from memory. The door opened behind her. She didn't turn around, already recognizing Lucas's footsteps. "Marshal Brennan wants to see us," he said quietly. "Says it's urgent." They found the marshal in his makeshift office at the hotel, surrounded by papers and looking 10 years older than when he'd arrived. He gestured them to sit. "We've got a problem. A big one." Brennan pulled out a telegram. "The judge assigned to Whitlock's trial just recused himself. Conflict of interest." "What kind of conflict?" Clara asked. "The kind where Whitlock's lawyers dug up a 20-year-old business deal between the judge's brother and one of Whitlock's subsidiaries. Completely legal, but enough to claim bias." Brennan tossed the telegram down. "The new judge is Harold Pemberton. He's known for being lenient with wealthy defendants." Lucas leaned forward. "How lenient?" "Last 3 corruption cases he presided over? All acquitted or pleaded down to fines." Brennan's expression was grim. "And his campaign for his current position was funded by people with ties to Whitlock's business partners." Clara felt ice spread through her veins. "They bought the judge." "I can't prove that, but yes, that's what I think." Brennan rubbed his face. "Even with all our evidence, all our witnesses, if Pemberton wants Whitlock to walk, he'll find a way." "Then we get him removed too," Lucas said. "On what grounds? He hasn't done anything yet. We can't remove a judge for crimes he might commit." Brennan looked at Clara. "I need you to understand something. You've done incredible work here. You've given us more evidence than I've seen in 10 years of territorial law enforcement. But the system is rigged. It's been rigged for men like Whitlock since this territory was founded." "So we give up?" Clara's voice was sharp. "Let him walk? Let everything we've fought for mean nothing?" "I'm saying prepare yourself for disappointment." Brennan's tone was gentle but firm. "Sometimes the bad guys win, Miss Whitmore. Not because they're smarter or stronger, but because they own the referee." Clara stood abruptly and walked out. Lucas followed her into the cold night air. "Clara, wait, no!" She spun to face him. "No, I'm not accepting this. We didn't fight this hard, risk this much just to watch some corrupt judge set him free." "What choice do we have?" "We make sure the trial never happens." Lucas froze. "What are you talking about?" Clara's eyes were hard. "Whitlock's being held in Helena, waiting for trial. He's vulnerable, isolated. If something were to happen to him before he reaches that courtroom..." "You're talking about murder." Lucas grabbed her shoulders. "Clara, listen to yourself. That's not justice. That's revenge." "Maybe revenge is all we're going to get." "And then what? You become a killer? Spend the rest of your life running from the law?" Lucas's voice cracked. "That's not who you are." "You don't know who I am. None of you do." Clara pulled away. "I've killed before, Lucas. In combat, sure. But I've still ended lives. And sometimes I wake up at 3 in the morning and I can't remember if it was the right choice or if I'm just good at justifying it to myself." "This is different, is it? Whitlock's going to walk free. He's going to come back here and destroy this town piece by piece until there's nothing left. And then he'll move on to the next place and do it again." Tears streaked down her face. "How many people have to suffer before one bullet in the dark becomes the moral choice?" Lucas had no answer. They stood in the cold silence, the weight of impossible decisions crushing down on both of them. Then a voice spoke from the shadows. "She's right, you know." They whirled.
Henry Sutton stepped into the lamplight, his banker's clothes rumpled, his face gaunt.
Mr. Sutton?
Clara's hand moved instinctively toward where a weapon would be.
What are you doing here?
Listening. Thinking. Sutton's hands shook as he lit a cigarette. I've been Whitlock's banker for 20 years. I've watched him destroy good people, ruin families. I told myself I was just doing my job, just following orders. He laughed bitterly.
But there's no just in it, is there? Every signature I forged, every document I falsified, I was choosing him over them, over you, over everyone.
Why are you telling us this? Lucas asked. Because I'm done choosing wrong. Sutton pulled out a folded paper. This is a transfer order for the Helena jail. It moves Whitlock from his current cell to the courthouse holding area tomorrow night, 24 hours before trial. The route goes through Cooper's Pass. Clara's breath caught. Cooper's Pass was 30 miles of isolated mountain road. No witnesses, no backup. Just one transport wagon and maybe 2 guards. If someone wanted to intercept that wagon, Sutton continued, his voice hollow, they'd have maybe a 15-minute window where nobody would know anything had gone wrong. By the time reinforcements arrived, it would be too late.
You're giving us a chance to kill him,
Clara said flatly. I'm giving you information. What you do with it is your choice.
Sutton dropped the paper on the ground. But I won't judge you for it. God knows I've got no right. He walked away, disappearing back into the darkness.
Clara picked up the paper, her hands trembling. Lucas read over her shoulder. Clara, please, don't do this.
Give me one good reason why not.
Because you'll never come back from it. Because the woman who teaches children their ABCs, who fights for justice through truth and evidence, she'll die out there in that pass. And I don't think the person who comes back will be someone you recognize. Clara crumpled the paper.
Maybe that person needs to die anyway. Maybe she was always just pretending.
I don't believe that.
Then you're a fool.
She turned to walk away, but Lucas grabbed her hand. I love you. The words hung in the frozen air between them. Clara stopped breathing. I know I've got no right to say it. I know I failed you when you needed me. But I love you, Clara. Not the soldier, not the teacher. You, all of you. The broken parts and the strong parts and everything in between. His voice was raw. And I'm begging you not to throw that away on revenge. Clara pulled her hand free.
Love doesn't fix this, Lucas.
Maybe not. But it's all I've got to offer. She looked at him for a long moment. This man who'd stood by her through everything, who'd sacrificed his relationship with his mother for her, who'd risked his ranch and his future. And she wanted so badly to believe that love was enough. But she'd seen too much, knew too much. The world didn't run on love. It ran on power and money and violence. And sometimes the only way to stop evil was to become something just as dark.
I need to think, she said finally. Alone.
She walked into the night, leaving Lucas standing under the lamplight, with heartbreak written across his face. Clara didn't go back to her room. She walked through Red Willow's empty streets, past shuttered windows and sleeping families, until she reached the schoolhouse. She let herself in and stood in the darkness, surrounded by the ghosts of every lesson she'd taught, every child she'd reached, every small victory against ignorance and fear. She thought about Tommy Garrett, who'd learned to read because she refused to give up on him. About Mary Garrett, who'd found the courage to stand up because Clara had shown her what courage looked like. About a whole town that had started believing in justice again because one woman had been willing to fight for it. And she thought about what would happen if she went to Cooper's Pass tomorrow night. if she put a bullet in Edgar Whitlock's head and walked away. The evidence would still exist. The trial would still happen, just with different charges. Henry Sutton would still testify. The corrupt networks would still unravel. But Clara would be a murderer. A vigilante. Everything she'd fought against in her military career, every reason she'd left that life behind, she'd become the very thing she feared most in herself. She was still standing there when dawn broke through the windows, and she still didn't know what she was going to do. Lucas found her at 7 in the morning, sitting at her desk like she was waiting for students to arrive. "Did you sleep?" he asked. "No." "Did you decide?" Clara looked at him with exhausted eyes. "I don't know how to be good anymore, Lucas. I don't know if I ever did. In the military, it was easy. You had orders, you had rules of engagement, you knew who the enemy was. But here?" She gestured helplessly. "Here, everything's gray. Whitlock's a monster, but killing him outside the law makes me a monster too. Except maybe sometimes being a monster is the only way to protect people who can't protect themselves." Lucas sat down beside her. "You want to know what I think?" "Yes." "I think good people don't agonize over these decisions. They just do what feels right in the moment and deal with consequences later." He took her hand. "But you're sitting here tearing yourself apart trying to find the right answer. That tells me everything I need to know about who you really are. Or it just means I'm a coward who can't make hard choices. Clara, you've made nothing but hard choices since you got here. Standing up to Whitlock, risking your safety for children who weren't yours, fighting back when everyone told you to run." He squeezed her hand. "But this choice? It's not about courage. It's about who you want to be when all this is over." A knock on the schoolhouse door interrupted them. Marshal Brennan stood there, his expression grave. "Miss Whitmore, Mr. Hale, I need to speak with you both. Now." They followed him outside where a wagon waited. In the back, tied and gagged, was Deputy Harris. But he wasn't alone. There were 2 other men, also bound, both wearing the remains of deputy badges. "Found them preparing to ambush the transport wagon," Brennan explained. "They were going to kill Whitlock themselves, make it look like an escape attempt. Probably blame it on you, Miss Whitmore, since everyone knows you have the skills." Clara felt the blood drain from her face. "They were going to frame me?" "Worse. They were going to force you into it." Brennan pulled out a letter. "We found this in Harris's pocket. It's addressed to you. Says if you don't kill Whitlock during transport, they'll burn down the school with the children inside during tomorrow's morning session." The world tilted. Clara grabbed the wagon for support. "They were going to use the children as leverage to turn me into an assassin?" "That's exactly what they were going to do. And then kill you after to tie up loose ends." Brennan's face was granite. "But we got them first. All 3 are going to Helena in chains." Lucas studied Clara as she swayed. "How did you know?" "Henry Sutton came to me at midnight, told me everything, said he couldn't live with himself if he let this happen." Brennan looked at Clara carefully. "He also said he gave you the transfer route information, said he was testing you, wanted to see if you'd take the bait." Clara's throat was tight. "And if I had?" "Then he would have known his read on you was wrong, that you were just another soldier who solved problems with bullets." Brennan's expression softened slightly. "But you didn't go, did you? Even with the perfect opportunity, the perfect justification. You stayed here, chose the hard path." Tears burned Clara's eyes. She'd come so close, so terrifyingly close to becoming exactly what they'd wanted her to be. If Lucas hadn't said he loved her, If she hadn't spent that night in the schoolhouse remembering why she'd come here.
Thank you, she whispered. For stopping them. For everything.
Don't thank me. Thank Sutton. And thank yourself for being strong enough to choose right, even when wrong was easier. Brennan climbed into the wagon. The trial's still happening. Judge Pemberton is still presiding. But I've got new evidence now. Proof that Whitlock's people were willing to commit murder to prevent testimony. That changes things. Not enough to guarantee conviction, but enough to make it harder for a judge to ignore without exposing his own corruption. As the wagon rolled away, Clara sank down onto the schoolhouse steps. Her whole body was shaking.
I almost did it, she said to Lucas. I almost went.
But you didn't.
Only because you stopped me. Because you said...
She couldn't finish the sentence. Lucas sat beside her, pulling her close. I meant it. Every word. They sat together as the town woke up around them. Parents dropping children off for school, shopkeepers opening stores. Life continuing, like the whole world hadn't almost shattered the night before. At 8 o'clock, Clara stood and straightened her dress.
I need to teach. The children are waiting. Are you sure? After everything. Especially after everything.
She managed a weak smile.
This is who I am, Lucas. Not the soldier, not the weapon. The teacher. And those kids need to see that I'm still here, still fighting the right way.
She walked into the schoolhouse where 17 children waited with eager faces and open books. And for the next 6 hours, Clara taught reading and arithmetic and history, pouring everything she had into each lesson, each answer, each moment of connection. Because this was her war now, not fought with guns and bombs, but with knowledge and hope and the stubborn refusal to let darkness win. When school ended, Mary Garrett approached Clara's desk with tears in her eyes.
Miss Whitmore, I heard what happened, what they tried to make you do.
Mary's voice shook.
Thank you for choosing us, for staying good.
Clara's throat tightened.
I'm not good, Mrs. Garrett. I'm just trying to be.
That's all any of us can do. Mary squeezed her hand. We leave for Helena tomorrow. Half the town's coming to testify. We're going to fill that courtroom so full, there won't be room for corruption to hide. What if it's not enough? Then we try again, and again, until it is. Mary's eyes were fierce. You taught us that, Miss Whitmore. You taught us that fighting for what's right isn't about winning every battle. It's about refusing to surrender. After Mary left, Clara sat alone in the quiet classroom. Tomorrow they'd go to Helena. Tomorrow they'd face down a corrupt judge and a rigged system and all of Whitlock's money and power. And maybe they'd lose. But they'd lose standing up. They'd lose with their integrity intact and their hands clean and their children still believing that truth mattered. Lucas appeared in the doorway.
Ready to go home?
Clara looked around the schoolhouse one more time. At the repaired desks and new books and carefully drawn maps on the walls. At everything they'd built together from ashes and hope.
Yeah,
she said finally.
I'm ready.
They walked out into the evening light, hand in hand, toward whatever tomorrow would bring. And for the first time since arriving in Red Willow, Clara felt something like peace settling in her chest. Not because the fight was over, but because she finally knew which side of herself had won. The teacher, not the soldier. The builder, not the destroyer. And that was worth more than any victory violence could ever achieve. The wagon train to Helena left at dawn. 43 people from Red Willow made the journey. Parents, ranchers, business owners, even children who insisted on coming to support Miss Whitmore. They traveled together like a small army,
each carrying documents, receipts, memories of injustice they were finally ready to speak aloud. Clara rode with Lucas in his truck, following the wagons. Neither of them had slept. The weight of what was coming pressed down like a physical thing.
What if we lose?
Clara asked quietly, watching the sun rise over the mountains.
Then we go home and keep fighting. Lucas's jaw was set. But we won't lose. Not with this many witnesses. Not with all the evidence we've gathered.
You're more optimistic than Marshal Brennan.
Someone has to be.
They reached Helena by late afternoon. The courthouse loomed over the town square, all stone and authority and the weight of territorial law. Clara felt her stomach twist as they approached. Inside, the courtroom was already packed. Whitlock's lawyers occupied 3 tables, surrounded by documents and assistants. Whitlock himself sat in expensive clothes, looking calm and confident.
When he saw Clara enter, he smiled.
"Miss Whitmore, how kind of you to attend. I do hope you're prepared to watch justice actually work." Clara didn't respond. She took her seat beside Marshal Brennan, her hands clenched in her lap. Judge Harold Pemberton entered at precisely 4 o'clock. He was a large man with silver hair and the kind of face that looked stern, but hid something calculating underneath. He surveyed the packed courtroom with barely concealed annoyance. "This is a criminal proceeding, not a town social," he announced. "I'll have order, or I'll clear the room." The trial began. The prosecution presented evidence: forged deeds, falsified loan documents, testimony from Henry Sutton about years of systematic fraud. They showed records of bribes, threats, violence. Every crime Clara had documented laid out in meticulous detail. Whitlock's lawyers objected constantly. Judge Pemberton sustained most of the objections, his rulings growing increasingly favorable to the defense. By the end of the first day, Marshal Brennan's jaw was tight with frustration.
"He's blocking everything,"
the marshal muttered to Clara as they left the courtroom.
"Half our evidence won't even reach the jury at this rate."
There has to be something we can do.
"Unless we can prove Pemberton's corrupt, we're stuck with his rulings."
That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She paced her hotel room, her mind racing through options. They'd come so far, risked so much. Watching it all crumble because of one bought judge felt like drowning. A knock on her door made her jump. She opened it to find Henry Sutton, looking worse than she'd ever seen him. His hands shook, his eyes were bloodshot.
"Mr. Sutton, what's wrong?"
"I need to tell you something. About Judge Pemberton."
Sutton stepped inside, glancing nervously down the hallway.
"I kept something back. Something I didn't tell Marshal Brennan. Because I was scared.
But I can't watch this happen." Clara's pulse quickened. "What did you keep back?"
"Pemberton's son. He's got gambling debts, serious ones.
Whitlock paid them off 3 months ago. $50,000. Sutton pulled out a bank transfer document. "This is the proof. Direct payment from one of Whitlock's shell companies to a casino in San Francisco, clearing the debt." Clara stared at the paper. "This is bribery. Direct bribery of a sitting judge." "I know. And if you present it, Pemberton will be arrested. The trial will be declared a mistrial. Everything starts over with a new judge." "Then why didn't you say something before?" Sutton's face crumpled. "Because Pemberton knows about my involvement with Whitlock. He threatened to charge me with conspiracy if I exposed him. Said he'd make sure I went to prison for 20 years. My wife, my children, they'd lose everything." Clara looked at this broken man who'd enabled so much corruption out of fear and felt something shift in her chest.
Mr. Sutton, if you testify to this, if you expose Pemberton, you're risking everything.
I know. But I'm tired of choosing safety over right. You showed me that. You and everyone from Red Willow who came here knowing they might lose. His voice steadied slightly. I want to be brave like that. Just once. Before it's too late. Clara took the document carefully.
Are you sure? There's no taking this back once it's in play.
I'm sure. Tell Marshal Brennan. Let him decide how to use it. After Sutton left, Clara stared at the paper for a long time. This was it. The weapon they needed. But using it meant destroying Sutton's life, exposing him to prosecution, potentially sending him to prison. She thought about what Lucas had said, about who she wanted to be when this was over. Then she made her choice. The next morning, Clara arrived at the courthouse early and requested a private meeting with Judge Pemberton in his chambers. He agreed, probably curious about what the famous Navy SEAL wanted to discuss. She laid the transfer document on his desk without a word. Pemberton's face went white, then red, then settled into something hard and dangerous. Where did you get this?
Doesn't matter. What matters is what happens next.
Clara met his eyes.
You can recuse yourself from this trial right now. Claim illness, family emergency, whatever. Step down and let another judge take over. If you do that, this document disappears. Nobody ever sees it.
And if I don't?
Then I give it to Marshal Brennan during this morning's session, in open court, in front of everyone.
Clara's voice was steady.
Your career ends. Your son's debt becomes public knowledge. And you probably go to prison.
Pemberton stood slowly, his bulk towering over Clara. You think you can threaten me? You think you can walk into my chambers and I'm not threatening. I'm offering you a choice, the same choice you've been denying everyone else. Clara didn't back down. You can do the right thing and walk away with your dignity. Or you can force me to destroy you. But either way, you're not presiding over this trial anymore. For a long moment, Pemberton said nothing. Then he laughed, bitter and harsh. You know what the worst part is? I actually respect this. The stones it takes to walk in here and back me into a corner. He sat heavily. Whitlock told me you were dangerous. He was right.
So what's your answer?
Pemberton looked at the document, then at Clara. Something in his expression shifted. Not quite respect, but acknowledgement. If I recuse myself, and this document disappears like you promised, what guarantee do I have that you won't come after me later?
You don't. You have my word. That's all.
Clara paused. But my word is better than Whitlock's. He'll throw you under the wagon the second it's convenient. I won't. Not if you do right by this town. Pemberton was quiet for what felt like an eternity. Then he stood and walked to his desk. He wrote something on official letterhead, signed it, and handed it to Clara. My recusal. Effective immediately. Medical grounds. His voice was hollow. Judge Sarah Martinez will take over. She's honest. Probably too honest for her own good. Whitlock won't own her. Clara took the letter.
Thank you.
Don't thank me. I'm just choosing the slower death instead of the fast one. Pemberton met her eyes. But for what it's worth, I hope you win. People like Whitlock have been running this territory too long. It's time someone reminded them that power has limits. Clara left his chambers and went straight to Marshal Brennan. When she handed him the recusal letter, his eyes widened. How did you... Never mind. I probably don't want to know. He read it quickly. Judge Martinez is good news. One of the few judges in the territory Whitlock hasn't compromised.
This changes everything. Court reconvened at 9 o'clock. Judge Pemberton made a brief announcement about his recusal, citing health concerns. Whitlock's lawyers immediately objected, demanding delays, claiming they needed time to prepare for a new judge. But Judge Martinez, who arrived within the hour, denied every request. Mr. Whitlock has had ample time to prepare his defense. This trial will proceed. Her voice was crisp, no nonsense. And I'll thank the defense to stop wasting this court's time with frivolous motions. The trial transformed. Martinez allowed evidence Pemberton had blocked. She permitted testimony he'd limited. She challenged defense objections and demanded substantiation for every claim. By the third day, Whitlock's confidence had cracked. His lawyers were scrambling. The jury, 12 ordinary people from across the territory, listened with growing horror as witness after witness described years of systematic theft, violence, and corruption. Then came the moment that broke everything open. Victoria Hale walked into the courtroom. Lucas stood up in shock.
Mother? What are you doing here?
Victoria didn't look at her son. She walked straight to the witness stand and was sworn in. When the prosecutor asked her to state her relationship to the defendant, her voice was clear and cold.
Edgar Whitlock has been blackmailing me for 7 years.
The courtroom erupted. Judge Martinez gavelled for order. Lucas grabbed Clara's arm, his face white with shock. Victoria continued, her aristocratic composure finally cracking.
My late husband made some poor business decisions before he died. Investments that failed. Debts that would have destroyed our ranch. Whitlock offered to help. For a price.
He bought the debts and agreed to keep them secret as long as I supported his interests in the territory. Voted the way he wanted in ranchers' associations, influenced other landowners, kept quiet when I saw his crimes. "Why are you coming forward now?" the prosecutor asked. Victoria's eyes finally found Lucas in the crowd.
Because my son taught me something. He chose integrity over inheritance. He chose a woman of principle over his mother's approval. And I realized I've spent 7 years being exactly what I accused her of being. Someone who enables evil through silence.
She turned to the jury.
Edgar Whitlock destroys everything he touches. He destroyed my marriage, my self-respect, my relationship with my only child. And I won't let him destroy one more life. Not if I can stop it.
The prosecution presented documents Victoria had kept, proof of the blackmail, proof of Whitlock's manipulation, proof of a network of coercion that stretched across the entire territory. Every prominent person he'd controlled, every debt he'd weaponized, every secret he'd exploited. Whitlock's lawyers tried to discredit her, claimed she was lying for attention. But Victoria's testimony was too detailed, too documented, too clearly the truth. When she stepped down from the stand, Lucas met her outside the courtroom. Clara stayed back, giving them privacy.
Why didn't you tell me?
Lucas's voice shook.
All those years, you were protecting the ranch from him? I told myself I was protecting you, protecting our legacy.
Victoria's eyes were red.
But I was really just protecting my pride. I couldn't admit your father had failed, that I needed help, that I was weak.
You're not weak. You're here now.
Only because that woman you love showed me what real strength looks like.
Victoria glanced at Clara.
She fights without compromising her soul. I've spent 7 years compromising mine. I don't expect forgiveness, Lucas, from you or from her. I just want to finally do something right.
Lucas pulled his mother into a hug. She stiffened, then collapsed against him, crying like Clara had never seen a woman of her station cry. Years of buried shame and fear pouring out in the courthouse hallway. The trial lasted 2 more days. The evidence was overwhelming. Whitlock's lawyers tried everything: technicalities, character assassination, desperate motions. Nothing worked. Judge Martinez was relentless. The jury was engaged, and the truth was too massive to deny. On the final day, as closing arguments concluded, Clara sat beside Lucas and watched Edgar Whitlock's face. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked small, defeated. The power and certainty that had defined him for decades was gone. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood and read the verdict. On the charge of fraud in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of extortion, we find the defendant guilty.
On the charge of conspiracy to commit arson, we find the defendant guilty. On all charges, we find the defendant guilty. The courtroom exploded with cheers. Judge Martinez gavelled for order, but couldn't suppress the joy. Parents hugged. Ranchers wept. Mary Garrett grabbed Clara's hand and squeezed so hard it hurt. Whitlock sat frozen as the judge sentenced him to 25 years in territorial prison, with no possibility of parole for 15. His empire would be dismantled. His assets would be seized and distributed to compensate his victims. Everything he'd built through theft and violence was gone. As they led him away in chains, Whitlock looked directly at Clara. "This doesn't end. My lawyers will appeal. My friends will—"
"You don't have friends anymore," Clara said quietly. "You have accomplices, and they're all running for cover while they still can."
Whitlock's face twisted with rage. "You destroyed my life!"
"No. You did that yourself."
"I just made sure everyone could see what you'd already done." They dragged him out screaming threats that nobody believed anymore. Outside the courthouse, Red Willow's delegation celebrated. Marshal Brennan shook Clara's hand with genuine respect. "You did good work here, Miss Whitmore. Better than most professional investigators. You sure you don't want a badge?" Clara smiled.
"I'm sure. I've got a classroom waiting for me."
"Those kids are lucky to have you."
"I'm lucky to have them."
The journey home took 2 days. The wagons rolled through Montana countryside, carrying people who'd left their town broken and were returning victorious. They sang songs, told stories, made plans for rebuilding. Clara rode with Lucas, her head on his shoulder, watching the landscape roll past. She was exhausted down to her bones, but it was a clean exhaustion, the kind that came from honest work, not violence. "What happens now?" Lucas asked. "With us, I mean." Clara was quiet for a moment. "I don't know. We barely know each other outside of crisis. Maybe when things settle down, we'll realize we've got nothing in common."
"Or maybe we'll realize we've got everything that matters in common."
"Like what?"
"Stubbornness, courage, the ability to forgive people who don't deserve it."
Lucas smiled. "Plus, I build furniture and you teach children. We could open a combination school and carpentry shop. Make it a real family business." Clara laughed, the sound surprising her with its likeness.
"Family business? We're not even courting properly."
"Then let me do this right." Lucas pulled the truck over and turned to face her. "Clara Whitmore, would you do me the honor of letting me court you? Properly. With flowers and Sunday dinners and long conversations that have nothing to do with corruption or violence or trials?"
"What if it doesn't work out?"
"Then we'll have tried. And at least we won't spend the rest of our lives wondering what if." Clara looked at this man who'd stood beside her through everything, who'd risked his inheritance for justice, who'd told her he loved her when she needed to hear it most. And she realized that somewhere between fighting fires and facing down guns and choosing peace over revenge, she'd fallen in love with him too.
"Yes,"
she said softly.
"I'd like that very much."
They reached Red Willow 3 days after the verdict. The entire town turned out to meet them, cheering and crying and celebrating. Someone had hung a banner across Main Street. "Welcome home, heroes." Clara stood in the middle of it all, overwhelmed. These people who'd once whispered about her, who'd believed Whitlock's lies, who'd been too scared to support her. They were calling her a hero, treating her like she'd single-handedly saved them.
"I didn't do this alone," she told the crowd. "Every person who testified, every parent who stood up, every witness who chose truth over fear. You're the heroes. I just refused to stay quiet."
"And that made all the difference," Bill Peterson called out. "You showed us we didn't have to accept corruption, that we could fight back."
"So what do we do now?" someone else shouted. "How do we make sure this never happens again?" Clara looked around at the faces, young and old, hopeful and uncertain. "We build better. We teach our children to question authority when it's unjust. We support each other instead of tearing each other down. We remember that power belongs to the people, not to whoever has the most money." "And we start by finishing that school," Mary Garrett announced. "We're going to build the finest schoolhouse in Montana, with a real library and proper desks and everything Miss Whitmore needs to teach our children right." The crowd roared approval. Within a week, construction began. Lucas donated lumber from his ranch. Other families contributed labor, materials, time. The school that rose from the ashes of Whitlock's arson attempt was 3 times the size of the original, with space for more students, more books, more hope. Clara taught throughout the construction, holding classes outside when the noise got too loud, never missing a single day. And slowly, families who'd pulled their children out started bringing them back. Not all at once, not with apologies, but with the quiet acknowledgement that they'd been wrong to abandon her. 6 months after the trial, the new school opened. Clara stood at the front of her classroom, a real classroom, with windows that opened, and a stove that worked, and shelves filled with books donated from across the territory, and looked at 43 students, 43 children eager to learn, to grow, to become something better than what they'd been taught to accept. "Good morning, class," she said, her voice steady and sure. "Good morning, Miss Whitmore," they chorused back, and in that moment, Clara knew she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Not running from her past, not hiding from who she'd been, but choosing, every single day, to be someone new, someone who built instead of destroyed, someone who taught instead of fought. Lucas proposed on a Sunday evening 3 months later, as they walked beside the creek where Clara had once cried after nearly becoming a vigilante. He didn't have a ring, just a simple question and a heart full of hope. Clara said yes without hesitation. They were married in the new schoolhouse, surrounded by the entire town. Victoria Hale stood beside Lucas, reconciled with her son, and cautiously befriending Clara. Henry Sutton attended with his family, rebuilding his reputation through years of honest work. Even Marshall Brennan came, bringing news that the investigation into Whitlock's network had exposed corruption across 6 territories and led to dozens of arrests. "You started something bigger than you know," Brennan told Clara at the reception. "People across the territory are standing up now, refusing to accept crooked officials. You made that possible." Clara squeezed Lucas's hand. "We made it possible. All of us together." Years later, when Clara's students asked about the famous trial, about the woman who'd been a Navy SEAL and taken down a corrupt empire, she always gave the same answer. "I was just a teacher who refused to look away from injustice. And when I stood up, other people stood with me. That's what changed things. Not violence, not revenge, Just ordinary people deciding they deserved better and being willing to fight for it the right way.
But you weren't ordinary, Miss Whitmore. One student always protested. You had special training, special skills.
Everyone has special skills, Clara would reply. Your mother's cooking, your father's carpentry, your neighbor's kindness.
What matters is whether you use those skills to build up or tear down. I chose to build, and that choice, made every single day, is what defines us all. The schoolhouse in Red Willow still stands today, a testament to what ordinary people can achieve when they refuse to surrender to fear. Inside its walls, generations of children learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing what's right when everything in you screams to run. That justice isn't guaranteed. It's something you fight for every single day. That redemption is always possible for those brave enough to change. And in the quiet moments between lessons, when Clara looked out at her students and saw the future they represented, she knew with absolute certainty that leaving the military for this small Montana town was the most important mission she'd ever accepted.
Because the wars that matter most aren't fought with weapons. They're fought with words and truth and the stubborn refusal to let darkness define the world our children inherit.